Welcome. Today, I'm going to blacksplain why white Anglo-Saxon Western slavery was, is, and always will be the worst kind of chattel slavery that ever existed. Now, what are my qualifications to speak on this topic? I may appear to be black, as you can see from my skin, but more importantly, in this current timeline, in this current year, I am wearing this authentic African cloth to show that I do identify as a black person. So I am the perfect person to blacksplain something if it can be blacksplained. Going further, I have seen many well-traveled white leftists who have been to brown places and have black friends who speak out on behalf of black and brown issues. We hear how climate change is really a racist issue. We hear how white silence is part of the violence. So here I am to return the favor and blacksplain something to you out there. So since I've lived amongst you whites longer than most of them have lived amongst the browns and blacks that they speak for, I feel I'm in a good position to speak on these topics. A lot is said about white people, a lot more than other groups. This is actually essentially why white slavery was, is, and will be the worst. The problem is that there is a lot to be said about white people, and this is white people's fault. So let me blacksplain this to you, white folk. We are humans. We are part of the human race, all of us. But within this large human race, there are individual races. So trying to pretend that there are no differences is something that I'm not going to do. I will admit that there are differences all over the place. There are clearly differences in the past, today, and for the foreseeable future. So how does one judge these races? Why are white people so guilty? Why is it white people's fault? Well, because you wrote it down. You should know this by now. This is not a controversial thing to say. It's not about what you did, but what someone can prove that you did. Look at OJ. We all know that he did it, but they couldn't prove it. So you guys did slavery just like everybody else has done. Since known history, we've all been keeping slaves. All the races, all the locations, all over the place. The difference is that you guys wrote it down. Not only did you write it down, you even invented a language and spread that language all around the world so other cultures and races and people could read the history of you doing these things. This is such a white male thing to do. And before you accuse me of misandry here on top of racism, come on. First of all, I'm just blacksplaining something. This is not about race. I'm just pointing something out. And why I'm focusing on white men is because we all know that women cheat as much as men do. They just don't leave as much evidence. White men have been all dear diary this, dear diary that for too long. Now, if writing things down wasn't just enough, you go ahead and make films, TV shows, entertainment, plays, comic books, all kinds of media about these horrors in your history so that even illiterate people can know about this. They don't even have to read to know about this. And we know how much appearances matter. Remember again, the cloth makes me black. In this day and time, remember, black. Someone can just have a degree. It doesn't matter what the content of the degree is. As long as they have the degree and they can put it up on the wall, it shows that they're competent. So, this level of creating visual evidence of what you did. It's not just snitching on yourself. This is taking it to another level. Let's say snitching is over here. You guys are you're off somewhere in the stratosphere of the snitchdom, of the snitchosphere. You've passed the snitchosphere. You're taking it to a level of recording what you did, turning in the evidence, and then you're enacting it for everybody that wants to hold you responsible and punish you for it. It's a level of psychosis that I find hard to understand. And do you know why they want to punish you even more? Because you are the ones that try to stop it the most. This is the whole he who smelt it dealt it thing, remember with farts back in the day. Doesn't matter who actually farted, whoever pointed it out first was clearly the one who did it. The whole don't kill the messenger thing, don't crucify the Messiah, but the Messiah was crucified. So you come out and you point out that slavery is a horrible thing after participating in it, and while other places and races still want to participate in it. So in comparison, you make them look worse for not having stopped it on their own. If you're doing something bad and then somebody else finally points it out and you're like, hey, I kind of knew it was bad, but then I'm mad that that person pointed out that's bad. This is what happens. So you know that kind of thing where you're kind of doing something or you think you're going to do something and you think it's the right thing to do, but you're like, I'm going to wait a little bit, and then somebody comes in and tells you, hey, you should be doing that, and you get mad at the person for telling you that you should be doing that, even though you knew you should be doing that, but you were going to do it a little later. Yeah, it's something like that. But then hey, I guess after all of this, in this day and time, you've also invented the megastate, which is a whole nother way of enslaving people in the chains of freedom. But that's a whole black explanation for another time. Okay, so that's it for the black explanation. I'll probably there's a few other topics I'm thinking of doing in that technique. I don't know. It was tough getting through it. I couldn't get through it, and I might put up some bloopers. But this seriously talking about the topic of slavery. Slavery has existed since humans have been able to use their strength over other humans. So pretty much since the beginning of civilization, societies, there's been slavery in some form or another. Now, I know that chattel slavery was somewhat different when you go with complete different races, and this is for the people who think there's no races, then it shouldn't be an issue, but it is an issue. They are races, and it was somewhat different when they had that dehumanization of this is another race. Yet this was happening within similar races. There was slavery going on in Africa, where Africans were enslaving other Africans. And this is one thing that I found out when I was learning more about slavery, thinking, okay, I used to think that, look, if Africa for some reason had gotten to a civilization point where they had the ships and the ability to travel to Europe and get to Europe and find the Europeans living in huts, I think there wasn't even two-story buildings in Africa when the Europeans got here and they had ships that could travel across the ocean. The wheel wasn't something that was being used in Africa. So there was a lot of societies were epochs or eras apart, essentially. Now, if the Africans had gotten to Europe and found the Europeans in the state that the Africans were when the Europeans came to Africa, I used to think, yeah, they would probably have enslaved them too. Now, I did actually think more about this until later on I started studying, okay, how did the actual slave trade happen? How did the Europeans actually go there and survive? Did they go in and actually track them down? I used to make this kind of horrible joke, just giving a little trigger warning right now. So, horrible joke coming in. Why do Africans have distance runners, whereas African Americans and Caribbeans are the sprinters? Well, during the slave trade, when the slavers were coming, they would start chasing the people down, and the ones who were caught and brought over as slaves would sprint, get tired, slow down, get caught, whereas the Africans would just keep running and running and running and get away. So yeah, horrible joke, horrible taste. Used to say it, used to think, ha ha ha, got some laughs out of it. But the actual reality of this is Africans were the ones who enslaved other Africans and sold them to the Europeans. Not because of any running or anything, but there could have been some running involved, just physical strength, different political issues and strife within the continent of Africa that still exists to this day and still exists all around the world within similar races and similar groups. The in-group, out-group thing always works in a way. So you had these societies where they would capture them and sell them out. So I used to think, if the Americans rightfully had guilt and had to pay reparations to African Americans for this evil that they committed hundreds of years ago, then didn't the Africans also owe African Americans some sort of reparation? How come they don't go back to Africa and demand that? Now, even if you discount the fact that African Americans, if you take black people as a race, that group itself, I think they said, if you took African Americans by itself and put them in as as a country in and of itself, it'd be one of the highest earning countries in the world. I think it would be up in the top 20. I could be wrong, so don't quote me on that. But yeah, they're doing pretty well. At least African Americans, if you take them as a country and compare them to countries in Africa, they're doing better than those people. So of course, even if there was, you have to take that away to talk about the reparations going to Africans. But now, just the guilt itself, just to say, I'm sorry for capturing you and selling you to the slave trade, like the white people today have that guilt to say, I'm sorry for my ancestors capturing you and bringing you over here to the Americas. Now, discount the fact that a minority of the actual slaves that were on the Atlantic crossing came to America. Most of them went down to South America and the Caribbean islands. Now, discounting all that, and that Atlantic trade is a key part, I thought, okay, as somebody who's Kenyan, in East Africa, should we have some sort of guilt, some sort of reparations to be paid to the African Americans? And I started looking into the slave trade and found out that majority of the slaves on the Atlantic crossing came from Western Africa, came from about 5 countries in Western Africa. They're the ones that came out to the Americas. So I thought, okay, then that kind of absolves us of some guilt. But I know the tribes are moving around and all that, so there was all that. Then I started looking into the slave trade more, and that's when I found out about the Arab slave trade. And I found out that millions and millions of people, of Africans, were taken during the Arab slave trade. And it was a 30% death rate during the Atlantic crossing. In the Arab slave trade, the people were marched through the Sahara, up to North Africa, and over to Arabia. That had about a 90% death rate. When they got there, the men were castrated, and the women who had kids, the kids were normally killed. That's why today you don't see a black population in the Middle East, whereas you do see black populations in South America and North America. So, will there be a time when African countries make movies about their history of capturing their fellow Africans and selling them off to Europeans, to Westerners, to white people? I don't think so. It might happen, but I don't see that happening anytime soon. I don't see it happening in the Middle East. I don't see this happening necessarily about different eras of slavery going on within the cultures themselves. I haven't studied the slavery itself in Asia, but we know about Genghis Khan and his activities. In general, we know about these, and that involved slavery, that involved rape, that involved great horrors. That in some way that's discussed, but I don't think it's shown as viscerally as the Western slave trade. So this has sounded like a lot of negative things, but I think there's a lot of positive coming from this. If you're honest and if you talk about something negative, I know they say this snitchers get stitches thing, and people think, oh, you got to hide these things. But no, look at the societies. Look at the West, look at America, look at the countries that did participate in this, fight to abolish slavery. And then we're more open about it. I know there's a lot of this white guilt, and there's a lot of people talking about, oh yeah, there's a white genocide now, and these people were always against white males and all this. And I know that some of that is out there, but I think this is a positive thing. In that, if you commit something wrong, if you do something wrong, and you put it out there, and people can tell you, look, this is wrong, the chances of you repeating this action are reduced. And that is a positive thing. You know, the fact that they're holding themselves to a higher standard than other cultures means they will be able to let go of the bad things that happened in the past. They'll be able to not repeat these bad things that end up holding these cultures back. Because just in general, you look at the cultures and the societies and the locations that still rely on the slave trade, and you look at the cultures that don't. I would suggest that the places where slavery no longer exists are better to live in than the places where slavery does, even if you're not a slave in those places. A lot of situations, people would rather be one of the poorest people in the locations where slavery doesn't exist, where the locations, the countries that fought to abolish slavery, than they would be in the upper class in the countries that participated in slavery or still participate in slavery. So in this situation, part of why Western slavery is always going to be seen as the worst kind of slavery is because they were honest about it. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, in my opinion. I think it's a positive thing. I think it's a thing that you can be honest about, see it, and don't just take it for what it is. And why I'm also saying, even if these other cultures did discuss and open about their slavery, things like The Roots, these certain shows were just, they came before their time. It's kind of the thing where I think, let's say you see Braveheart, which is that movie with William Wallace, for you guys who don't know, or Gladiator, which is the movie with Maximus. They're kind of the same kind of movie. This heroic guy fights back against the Empire, and the storylines are similar, but I think if you saw Braveheart first, Gladiator's not going to seem the same. If you saw Gladiator first, Braveheart's not going to seem the same. And this is the kind of thing. The West told their story about slavery the first. I think that has defined what the horror of slavery was, so that if you have these other cultures come out and be more open about it, it may not seem as horrific as it actually was, or that's actually going on right now. So that's it for now. Try to release a video soon. I might get another one of these blaxplanation things out. Hopefully I didn't just lose too many people to start thinking I was serious about that. But yeah, that's it for now. Till next video. Bye.